The struggle. The city never slept. Neon lights shone bright, machines hummed, and humans walked fast through the wide streets of the colony. Everyone looked busy, everyone looked important. But in one dark corner near the market gates, 3 figures stood like shadows in the rain. They were not human. They were alien widows. Their eyes searched the crowd with hope, but the people only turned away. A woman pulled her child closer when she saw them. A shopkeeper locked his door faster. Even a delivery robot beeped nervously and rolled to the other side of the road. The first widow, tall and thin with silver skin that reflected the city lights, whispered in a broken voice, "Maybe today. Maybe someone will hire us." The second widow, smaller and with 4 glowing eyes, shook her head. "No one wants us. Not after the war. They see our faces. They remember death." The third widow, the youngest, hugged her arms tight around her body. Her dark blue skin was marked with scars. She spoke softly. "But we must eat. We cannot live like this." Rainwater ran down their clothes. Their stomachs were empty. For 3 days they had begged for work. For 3 days every answer was the same. No. They tried the bakery first. The warm smell of bread made their mouths water. The eldest widow knocked on the door. A man opened it, looked at them, and his smile died. "Out," he said. "We don't. Hire your kind." "But please," and the eldest tried. "We work hard, we ask only for food." The man's face grew red. He shouted, "You widows are cursed. You bring bad luck. Out before my neighbors see you." He slammed the door. The sound echoed in the rain. The widows turned away, their hearts heavier than their empty stomachs. They went to the workshop next. The youngest widow asked, "Do you need help cleaning?" The mechanic inside stared at her scars and spat on the floor. "Go back to your graveyard," he growled. "Your husband's killed thousands of humans. Why should we trust you?" The widows froze. People nearby heard his words. Some stopped to watch. Whispers spread like fire. "They are enemy widows. Why are they here? Drive them out." Fear and anger filled the air. Stones rolled under their feet. A child threw one, laughing. The widows ran, ashamed, desperate, hearts pounding like drums. By evening, they hid under a broken roof in an alley. The rain still fell, cold and heavy. Their clothes clung to their thin bodies. The youngest widow whispered, I cannot go on. Maybe they are right. Maybe we do not belong." The one with 4 eyes touched her shoulder. "No, we lost our husbands. We lost our homes. But we still live. We must keep walking." The eldest stared at the city lights in silence. Her silver skin reflected the red glow of neon signs. She thought of her husband's last words before he fell in battle. Survive. No matter what. Survive. But how could they, in a world that hated them? The city grew louder as night came. Music, engines, shouts. The widows closed their eyes, trying to rest. Their stomachs growled. Then, footsteps, slow, careful. They opened their eyes. A shadow stood at the entrance of the alley. A man, human, his face hidden under a hood. The widows tensed. Would he chase them? Would he call guards? But the man said nothing. He placed a small bag on the ground. Inside was bread, still warm, a bottle of clean water. Then he stepped back into the rain and disappeared. The widows stared at the bag. Their eyes met, filled with doubt. "Is it safe?" the youngest asked. "What if it is poison?" the second whispered. The eldest looked at the food. Her stomach twisted in hunger. Her voice trembled. "What if it is hope?" They did not touch the food that night. They only sat listening to the rain, staring at the gift. Suspicion fought with need. Fear battled with hunger. Who was that man? Why had he helped when no one else dared? The colony around them roared with life. Ships landed in the docks, humans celebrated victories, and markets closed with heavy profits. But for the 3 widows, the world was nothing but silence, hunger, and the memory of kindness left in a small bag. The eldest finally whispered into the night, her voice both fragile and strong. Tomorrow. We try again. But far away, in the shadows, the hooded man still watched. His eyes followed them with quiet purpose. He had not chosen them by accident. The night was long. The widows did not sleep. The bread and water sat between them like treasure, but also like a trap. Rain dripped from the broken roof. Every sound in the alley made their hearts race. The youngest widow whispered, "We should not eat it. What if it is poisoned? What if they want to see us suffer?" The one with 4 eyes shook her head. "But why leave food if the plan was to kill us? Poison is expensive. Bread is not." The eldest said nothing. She only stared into the dark, where the hooded man had stood. His silence, his calm footsteps, they were more frightening than shouting. Shouting meant hate. Silence meant mystery. When morning came, the widows finally ate. The bread was soft, the water clean. It did not kill them. It gave them strength, but it also gave them fear. The city woke with noise and motion. Shuttles landed, traders opened shops, workers hurried to factories. The widows rose from their corner. Their bodies were weak, but their hope was weaker. Still, they had no choice. They walked through the market again. Human eyes followed them like knives. No one spoke, but the silence was heavy. By midday, the youngest cried. She was too tired, too hungry still. The second widow helped her walk, her 4 eyes glowing with worry. That was when the shadow returned. The hooded man stepped from the crowd. People moved aside. Some whispered, some frowned, but no one stopped him. He came close, too close. The widows froze, ready to run, but his voice was calm. "I have work," he said. The 3 widows exchanged quick looks. Work? No one had ever offered them work. The eldest asked carefully, "What kind of work?" The man's hood hid his face, but his tone was steady. "In my workshop, cleaning, carrying, simple things." The youngest shook her head. "Why us? You could hire anyone." The man's answer was strange. "Because no one else would do it the way you will." They did not understand. Was it kindness? Was it a trick? His words were like a locked door. No key, only questions. The second widow narrowed her glowing eyes. "Maybe this is a trap." The man only shrugged. "Maybe, or maybe it is your only chance." He turned and began to walk away. The widows stood frozen. His steps echoed in their ears. Finally, the eldest whispered, "If we stay here, we die. If we follow him, we may also die. But at least it is different." So they followed. He led them through narrow streets, past old houses and broken machines, until they reached the edge of the colony. There, hidden behind tall metal fences, was his workshop. The sign above it was old, letters faded, Kellen Repairs. Inside, the air smelled of oil and burning wires. Strange machines stood on every table, tools they did not know, engines that hummed, metal shells half-built. The walls were lined with maps and old star charts. The widows felt small in that place. It was not a simple workshop. It was something more. The man finally pulled back his hood. His face was rough, with a scar across his cheek. His eyes were sharp but not cruel. "I am Kellen," he said. "This is my shop. If you work here, you eat here. You sleep here, you are safe here, safe." The word hit them like thunder. They had not heard it in years. The youngest asked, her voice trembling, "Why do you help us?" Kellen's answer was simple. "Because no one else will." But the widows saw more in his eyes, something hidden, something heavy. He gave them old blankets, a corner to rest, and bread fresh from a small oven. The widows ate like they had not eaten in months. That night, while the others slept, the second widow with 4 eyes stayed awake. She crept across the workshop, curious. She touched a covered crate. It rattled. Inside, metal clinked, like weapons. She glanced at the walls. Maps, routes, numbers written in code. She saw a star system marked in red, circled many times. Kellen was not only a repairman, he was something more dangerous. Her breath caught. She almost woke the others. But then she saw Kellen, standing in the dark, watching her silently. He said, "Only one thing. Do not touch what you do not understand." She froze, heart pounding. Then he turned away, as if her spying meant nothing. But his calm voice was more frightening than shouting. The widows slept uneasily that night. They had food, they had a roof, but they also had new questions. Who was this human? Why had he chosen them? And why did his workshop feel less like a home and more like a battlefield waiting to happen? Secrets of the human. The first days in Kellen's workshop felt like stepping into another world. The widows had food now, blankets to sleep under, and work to keep their hands busy. For the first time in months, they were not begging on the streets. But comfort never erased suspicion. Every corner of the workshop whispered secrets. The widows felt it in the air, heavy like smoke after fire. The eldest widow, with silver skin, swept the floors while Kellen worked on a machine. Sparks flew, wires hissed, and strange tools hummed in his hands. His focus was sharp, almost too sharp, as if every screw he turned carried life or death. The youngest widow cleaned shelves. Her hands trembled when she touched small metal objects, tiny, devices glowing faintly blue. They looked harmless but pulsed like beating hearts. The second widow, with 4 glowing eyes, watched everything. She remembered the crate full of weapons she had seen at night. She remembered Kellen's calm warning. Since then, she did not touch anything again, but she saw more than the others realized. At sunset, Kellen gave them bread and soup. He spoke, little. "You worked well," he said. "Rest now." His words were short, but his eyes carried weight. The widows wondered, was he protecting them or using them? That night, while the others slept, the silver-skinned widow could not. She rose quietly and walked to the far wall. Maps stretched across it, star systems drawn with red circles, routes marked with lines. Some names had black crosses through them, like graves. Her hand touched one circle, a name written in bold, Vanish system. She remembered it. Her husband had died there in the war. The humans had destroyed their fleet. She froze. Behind her, a voice spoke. "You should not wander." She turned. Kellen stood in the shadows, silent as stone. "I was only looking," she said quickly. Kellen stepped closer. His scarred face was unreadable. "Looking at old wounds will not heal them." "Why keep them then?" she asked. "Why these maps?" His eyes narrowed, but he said nothing more. He turned and walked away. His silence was worse than anger. The next morning, the colony outside was restless. Shouts echoed from the market. A crowd had gathered. The widows dared not leave the workshop, but they could hear the words, "The alien widows live. They are being sheltered. This is betrayal." The youngest trembled. "They speak of us." Kellen appeared at the doorway, listening to the noise without fear. "They will not come here. Not yet. Not yet." The words chilled them. Later, while Kellen repaired a drone, the youngest widow asked softly, "Why do they hate us so much? We lost everything. We only want to live." Kellen paused. His hand stopped moving. For a long moment, he stared at the broken drone, not at her. "Because war does not end when guns go silent," he said. "Hate is slower to die." His voice was quiet but heavy, like stone pressing down. The widows wanted to ask more, but his face closed like a locked door. That night, the second widow with 4 eyes could not resist her curiosity. She waited, until Kellen slept in the corner chair, his head bent forward. She crept again to the covered crates. She lifted the cloth just enough to see. Inside, rifles, explosives, strange glowing devices. Not tools, weapons. Enough to arm soldiers. Her breath quickened. Why would a repairman keep such things? She lowered the cloth carefully. But when she turned, Kellen's eyes were open. He had not been asleep. For a moment, silence filled the workshop. Only the hum of machines spoke. Then Kellen stood and said, in a calm, steady voice, "You are alive because I chose it. Do not test me again." The widow froze, her glowing eyes wide. His words cut deeper than any blade. He walked away without another sound, but she felt his warning burn in her chest. Next day, work went on as usual. But fear grew between the widows. They ate bread, they swept floors, they cleaned tables. But every moment they wondered, who is Kellen? Why does he hide weapons? Why does he watch the stars with maps of war? The youngest whispered to the others, "Maybe he is a soldier. Maybe he is hiding from the law." The eldest shook her head. "No soldier works alone with secrets like these. He is something else." The second whispered, "Something dangerous." That evening, Kellen gave them food again. His face was calm, almost kind. "You are safer here than out there," he said. "Remember that." The widows nodded, but inside their hearts beat with fear. Safety had a price. They just did not know what it was yet. Outside, the colony still whispered, still hated, still waited. Inside, Kellen's workshop held mysteries deeper than the widows could imagine. And above them all, in the dark sky, ships passed like shadows, silent watchers of a future that was coming closer. The widows felt it. Something was building, something that would not let them rest. The threat, the workshop had become a fragile island in a storm. Inside, the widows worked in silence, sweeping, fixing, cleaning. Outside, the colony's voices grew louder. Hatred traveled through the streets. Like fire through dry wood, the eldest widow, silver-skinned, could feel it every time she looked out the window. Eyes followed the shop, whispers gathered in corners, and men spat on the ground when they passed. But still Kellen did not flinch. He worked, built, repaired, as if the world outside was only a shadow. Until the stone came. It was night. Rain drummed on the roof. The widows sat near the small fire Kellen had built, their stomachs finally full from warm soup. For the first time in months, they almost felt human again. Then the window shattered. Glass sprayed across the room. A heavy rock rolled onto the floor. Tied around it was a burning scrap of cloth. The widows screamed. Kellen stamped out the fire with his boot. He untied the cloth and read the message written in thick, angry letters, "Send them away or burn with them." The widows huddled together, trembling. The youngest whispered, "They will kill us. They will kill you too." Kellen's face was calm, but his jaw tightened. He crushed the note in his hand. "Sleep," he said simply. "Sleep?" The second widow gasped. "How can we sleep when they want us dead?" Kellen's voice was cold, steady. "Because fear will not keep you alive, but rest might." He turned away and began boarding up the window with wooden planks. The widows said nothing more, but they did not sleep. They watched the shadows outside, waiting for another stone, another fire, another attack. The next morning, the workshop felt different. The widows worked silently, but their eyes darted to the door again and again. Every sound from outside made them jump. At midday, Kellen left to buy supplies. He returned with bread, nails, and wood, but his expression was unreadable. "The colony does not want you here," he said flatly. "They will come again." The youngest cried out, "Then let us leave. We will not bring death to your door." But Kellen's voice was firm. "If you go, you die on the streets. If you stay, you might live. Choose." The widows stared at him. They saw no kindness in his eyes, but also no lies. His words were heavy, true, impossible to ignore. The eldest whispered, We stay." That night the threat returned. This time it was not a stone. It was voices. From the darkness outside, men shouted, "Human traitor! Send them out! Better 3 dead aliens than 1 dead town." The widows clutched each other. The youngest shook so badly she could not speak. Kellen walked to the door. He opened it just enough to look outside. The crowd was small but fierce, torches burning in their hands. "You have no right," one man shouted. "They are widows of our enemies. Their husbands killed our brothers, and you feed them? You shelter them?" Kellen's scarred face stayed calm. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the night. "They work for me. That is all you need to know." The crowd roared with anger. Stones hit the fence. One torch flew and landed in the dirt, smoke rising. The widows screamed, but Kellen did not move. He only stared until the men, frustrated, left with curses. When he closed the door, the workshop was silent except for the widow's heavy breathing. The second widow whispered, "Why do you risk yourself for us? Why fight your own people?" Kellen looked at her, his eyes dark. "Because I have fought enough wars to know the enemy is not always the one you are told it is." The widows did not understand, but they heard the weight in his voice. They felt the wall he built around his past. That night they could not sleep again. Every creak of the building, every whisper of wind felt like danger. But as dawn came, a new fear arrived. The youngest widow went to fetch water from the pump near the fence. As she bent down, her eyes caught movement across the street. A figure stood in the shadows, tall, armored, watching. Not a villager, not human. Her breath froze. The figure turned and vanished. She ran back, heart racing. "Someone was watching," she cried. "Not a man from the colony, something else." Kellen stopped what he was doing. His face turned hard. He walked outside, scanning the street, but the figure was gone. When he returned, he locked the door and pulled down the blinds. His voice was colder than before. "It seems the colony is not your only problem." The widows stared at him, fear clawing at their chests. If not the humans, then who? Kellen looked at them, long, silent, unreadable. Then he said, "If someone is hunting you, they will not stop. So if you wish to live, you will stay close, and you will listen." The widows nodded, too afraid to argue. Outside, the colony hated them. Inside, secrets pressed against every wall. And now, beyond both, an unseen enemy watched. The struggle was no longer about hunger or work. It was about survival. The chase, the days after the threats, felt like walking on thin ice. The widows worked, ate, and slept inside Kellen's workshop, but their fear never left. The colony hated them, and now something else, something unseen, was watching. The youngest widow woke each night from dreams of armored figures in the dark. The second widow listened for every sound, her glowing eyes wide with worry. The eldest, silver-skinned, tried to stay strong, but even her hands shook when she swept the floors. Kellen said little. He only worked on his machines, his eyes sharp, his face cold. But they saw it, the way he locked the doors tighter, the way his hand stayed near the weapon on his belt. He was preparing. For what, they did not know. It began at dawn. The widows were eating bread when the sound came, the roar of engines, heavy, close. Not colony shuttles. These were louder, deeper. Kellen looked up, his face like stone. "They've found us." The widows froze. "Who?" the youngest whispered. Kellen didn't answer. He grabbed a pack, filled it with tools, and pulled the widows to their feet. "We leave. Now." Outside, the streets were nearly empty, but in the sky, shadows moved, dark ships circling above the colony. Their engines thundered like distant storms. The widows' hearts pounded. "They are hunting us," the second widow breathed. "Yes," Kellen said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "And they will not stop." They hurried to the edge of town, moving through alleys, avoiding open streets. The widows clung to their cloaks, trying not to be seen, but whispers followed them. Faces turned, eyes burned with hate. "Traitor." Someone spat at Kellen. "Cursed widows," another hissed. "Better off dead." But Kellen did not slow. His steps were steady, his hand always close to his weapon. The widows followed, fear pressing against their throats. At the docks, Kellen led them to an old cargo, transport rusted and patched but ready. He pulled the door open and pushed them inside. "Sit down," he ordered. The widows obeyed, trembling. Engines roared as Kellen started the transport. The ship groaned, lifted, and rose into the morning sky. For a moment the widows felt relief. They were leaving the colony behind. But then shadows followed. Two dark crafts broke from the clouds. Sleek, armored, fast. They dove toward the transport like predators chasing prey. The youngest widow cried out, clutching her seat. "They're coming!" Kellen's hands moved quickly over the controls. The transport shook as he pushed it harder. "Hold on," he said. The ships behind them grew closer. Lights flashed on their hulls, symbols the widows knew. Enemy clans. The very clans whose men they had once called husbands. Their blood froze. "They want us," the eldest whispered. "They came for us." "Yes," Kellen said. His jaw tightened. "And they'll kill anyone who stands in the way." The chase began. The transport shot between canyons, engines screaming, rocks blurred past. The widows clung to each other, their bodies shaking with every violent turn. The hunters followed close, their weapons glowing. Bolts of fire lit the sky, striking the canyon walls, sending stone crashing down. "Faster!" the second widow cried. Kellen's scarred face stayed calm. "Faster will kill us. Smarter will save us." He twisted the ship through a narrow gap between cliffs. The hunters fired again, but their shots missed, crashing against stone. The canyon roared with echoes. The widows could hardly breathe. Every second felt like the last. At last, the canyon opened to a desert plain. The hunters surged forward, their weapons glowing brighter. The youngest widow's eyes filled with tears. "We cannot escape. They will catch us." Kellen's hands were steady, his eyes sharp. "Not today." He pressed a switch. Hidden panels on the transport opened, releasing a burst of metal shards. The hunters swerved, but one ship was struck. Flames burst from its wing, and it spiraled down into the desert. The widows gasped. Kellen had weapons on this old transport, traps hidden in plain sight. But the second hunter was still behind them, closer, faster. Inside the transport, alarms screamed. The hull shook as a blast struck the rear. Sparks rained from the ceiling. The widows cried out. "We're hit!" Kellen gritted his teeth. "Not enough to stop us." He pulled the transport low, skimming the desert floor. Dust and fire filled the air as the hunter closed in. Then Kellen did something strange. He slowed. The widows shouted in terror. "What are you doing?" But Kellen's eyes were cold, making him think we're weak. The hunter moved in close, ready to finish them. At the last second, Kellen pulled hard on the controls. The transport shot upward, engines screaming. The hunter dove too fast, too low. It crashed into the desert floor, exploding in fire and smoke. The widows stared, their mouths open in shock. Kellen had turned near death into victory. Silence filled the transport, broken only by the hiss of damaged systems. The widows sat trembling, hearts still racing. The youngest whispered, "You saved us." Kellen said nothing. His eyes were on the horizon, where the desert stretched endlessly. The eldest finally asked, "But why do they chase us? Why risk your life for ours?" Kellen's scarred face did not soften. His voice was low, heavy. "Because your past is not your fault, and because some wars never end unless someone chooses to fight different." The widows fell silent. His words were sharp, mysterious, full of pain they could not see. The transport flew on, damaged but alive, but they knew more hunters would come. The chase was not over. It had only begun. The battle. The desert stretched endlessly beneath them. The old transport rattled and groaned, smoke curling from its rear engine. The widows sat pressed together, trembling. Their eyes stayed on Kellen, who kept his scarred hands steady on the controls. "Where are we going?" the youngest asked. Her voice was thin, almost breaking. Kellen's eyes were on the horizon, a place they won't follow easily, an outpost, old, forgotten, but it will hold for a while. His voice carried no comfort, only fact. The widows looked at each other. For the first time, they understood. This human was no simple repairman. Nightfall. The transport reached a canyon marked with jagged rocks. Hidden inside was a small outpost, half buried in sand, its walls rusted, its towers broken. Long abandoned. Kellen landed the ship roughly, sparks flying as the landing gear screeched. The widows stumbled out, coughing in the desert wind. Inside, Kellen ordered. The widows followed him into the outpost. The air smelled of dust and old fire. Broken machines lay scattered, but Kellen moved like he knew every corner. He led them to a dark room with heavy doors. "This will keep you safe," he said. The eldest frowned. "Safe from who? The hunters we escaped? Or something else?" Kellen looked at her, his scar glinting in the dim light. "Both." The widows tried to rest, but the silence of the outpost was worse than the noise of the colony. Every creak of metal, every gust of wind through the broken walls felt like a threat. Then the sound came. Low at first, then growing. Engines. Many. The widows jumped to their feet. The second widow's 4 glowing eyes widened. "They found us." Kellen was already moving. He pulled open crates hidden under the floor. Inside, weapons, rifles, explosives, strange devices glowing faint blue. The widows stared. You prepared for this," the eldest whispered. Kellen's voice was steel. "I prepare for everything." The night sky lit with fire. Ships descended, sleek and dark, surrounding the canyon. Lights beamed down, cutting through the sandstorm. The widows huddled together, fear crushing their chests. "There are too many," the youngest whispered. Kellen checked his rifle, calm as stone. "Then you'll have to fight with me." The widows froze. "Fight? You want to live," Kellen said coldly. "Then stand, or die waiting." His eyes burned, not cruel, but unshakable. The widows trembled, but something inside them shifted. They had been widows, beggars, victims. Now they had a choice. The first blast shook the outpost. Walls cracked, sand poured in, alarms screamed. Kellen took position at a broken window, rifle aimed. He fired, and one hunter ship exploded in sparks. The widows ducked from the shock, but Kellen's voice snapped through the chaos. "Move. Hold. The line!" The eldest grabbed a small weapon from the crate. Her silver skin shone in the firelight as she aimed at the shadows outside. Her hand shook, but she fired. A soldier fell. The second widow, her 4 eyes glowing, lifted a strange device, something like a shield. She pressed it to the ground, and blue energy spread, forming a barrier that blocked incoming blasts. The youngest, terrified, clutched a rifle too large for her hands. But when a soldier broke through the door, she screamed and fired. The blast threw him back, lifeless. Their hearts pounded, their fear burned. But they fought. The battle raged. The canyon roared with fire and screams. Sandstorms twisted through. The night, carrying sparks and smoke. The widows moved with Kellen, each step guided by his sharp voice. "Left. Shield. Cover the door. Don't waste your shots." They were clumsy, terrified, but they stood. And slowly they realized they were not weak. Together they were strong. Hours passed like minutes. The outpost shook under the assault. But every time the hunters pressed forward, Kellen and the widows pushed them back. At last, silence fell. Smoke drifted through the broken walls. Bodies lay in the sand. The hunters, ships burned, their engines dead. The widows collapsed, trembling, gasping for air. Their hands shook, their hearts pounded. But they were alive. Kellen lowered his weapon, breathing hard but steady. His scarred face was unreadable. "You fought well," he said. The widows stared at him in shock. They had never heard those words. No one had ever told them they were more than cursed widows, more than useless shadows. For the first time, they felt something stronger than fear. They felt purpose. But the night was not done. Far above, more ships passed through the stars. Watching. Waiting, the eldest widow saw them and whispered, "They will come again." Kellen's eyes followed the dark sky. His voice was low, heavy. Yes, and next time, it will not just be about survival. It will be about what we stand for. The widows shivered, but in their hearts a fire burned. They were no longer just widows. They were fighters, survivors, and with Kellen beside them, the war they thought was over had only just begun. The new beginning. The battlefield was quiet at last. The night wind swept across the canyon, carrying the smell of smoke and burnt metal. The walls of the old outpost were broken, the ground covered with scorch marks and shattered weapons. The widows sat together in the dust, their bodies trembling, their hands raw from holding rifles. They could hardly believe they were alive. The youngest stared at her hands, they still shook. "I killed," she whispered, her voice small. "I killed one of them." The eldest touched her shoulder gently. "You lived. That is what matters." The second widow, her 4 glowing eyes dim with exhaustion, looked at Kellen. "We fought beside you. But this is not over, is it?" Kellen stood near the broken doorway, his rifle hanging loose in his scarred hands. His eyes were on the dark horizon, where faint lights moved like watchful stars. "No," he said quietly. "This is only the beginning." Morning came slowly. The sun painted the desert red, casting long shadows over the wreckage. By the time the widows stepped outside, the colony had arrived. Humans came in trucks, on bikes, carrying weapons. They stopped at the edge of the canyon, staring in silence at the scene before them. The widows felt their hearts sink. They were ready for more hate, more stones, more voices calling them cursed. But something was different. The humans saw the burning ships of the hunters. They saw the dead soldiers who had tried to storm the outpost. They saw 3 alien widows, standing alive among the ruins, and beside them, a human who had chosen to fight with them, not against them. Whispers spread through the crowd. They defended the colony. They fought the hunters. They saved us. The widows lowered their heads, waiting for anger. But the anger did not come. Not this time. A man stepped forward from the crowd, his face stern, but not cruel. He spoke to Kellen. "You sheltered them. You risked us all. Why?" Kellen's voice was steady. "Because I saw truth. They were not enemies. They were survivors. Just like us." The man looked at the widows. His jaw tightened. "Our brothers died in the war. Their husbands led the fight. How can we forgive that?" Kellen's scarred face hardened. "The dead are gone. Only the living remain. If we keep hating, the war never ends," the crowd murmured. Some frowned, some nodded. The widows stood silent, their hearts heavy. They knew forgiveness would not come easily. But for the first time, they saw something new in human eyes. Not only hate, not only fear, something else, something small, fragile, but real. Respect. Days passed. The widows remained with Kellen in the outpost as it was slowly rebuilt. Humans came, bringing wood, tools, even food. Not all helped, but some did. And that was enough to begin. The eldest worked beside Kellen, learning his machines. Her silver skin glowed in the firelight as she fixed wires and polished gears. The second used her 4 eyes to read maps and codes, helping Kellen prepare defenses. Her sharp gaze caught details others missed. The youngest learned to cook, to clean, and even to laugh again, though her laughter was soft, unsure, like a bird afraid to fly. For the first time, they were more than widows. They were workers, fighters, friends. But danger never vanished. Each night, Kellen watched the stars. The hunters were still out there. The war they carried in their hearts was not finished. One evening, the youngest asked him, "Why do you keep fighting even now?" Kellen looked at her, his scar dark in the firelight. His eyes were heavy with memories. "Because someone must," he said. "Someone must choose to fight not for revenge, but for tomorrow." The widows listened, their hearts full. His words were not just for himself. They were for them, too. At last the day came when the colony's governor arrived. Soldiers stood at his side, weapons ready, but their faces no longer burned with hate. The governor looked at Kellen, then at the widows. His voice was loud, clear. The colony is divided. Some still hate you, some now respect you. But all agree on one thing. You defended this place when others would not. For that, we owe you. He paused, then spoke the words the widows never thought they would hear. You may stay. You may live here, under protection, under law, not as outcasts, as part of this colony. The widows gasped. Tears filled their eyes. The eldest whispered, "After so long, we belong." The youngest clutched her hands together, unable to speak. The second closed her glowing eyes and breathed deeply, as if for the first time. Kellen only nodded, silent. But in his eyes, the widows saw something rare, something they had never seen before peace. That night, the colony held a small gathering. People came to see the widows, to hear their voices, to touch their hands without fear. Some still looked uncertain, some still kept their distance, but others smiled. The widows stood together, side by side, no longer shadows in the rain. And Kellen, standing with them, spoke the words that would echo through their lives. Sometimes all it takes is one choice, one person willing to see differently. That choice can change everything. The widows looked at him, their hearts full. They had lost husbands, homes, and worlds. But in the end, they found something greater, a new beginning. Not just survival, not just pity, but life, together.